The rain hammered Seattle like it had a personal grudge, and inside our smart home, my wife Cambria was delivering her own personal storm. "I'll wear what I want, text who I want, and go where I want," she snapped, waving her phone like a weapon. "You don't own me, Orion." I stood in our kitchen, watching this woman I'd married 8 years ago transform into someone I barely recognized. She wore a dress that cost more than most people's rent, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the weather, her manicured nails clicking against her phone screen. "I never said I owned you," I replied, keeping my voice level. "I just asked why you're getting texts at midnight from your boss." Cambria's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. Quote, "Those gadgets had bought this house. Those gadgets had funded her lifestyle. But I didn't bother reminding her. The woman standing before me had already made her choice clear. You know what your problem is, Orion?" She stepped closer, her perfume overwhelming. "You're boring. Predictable. You think because you invented some fancy AI software that you're special, but you're just another tech nerd who got lucky." I watched her face, searching for any trace of the woman who used to laugh at my jokes, who used to curl up next to me during these Seattle storms. Nothing. Just cold calculation and barely concealed contempt. "I see," I said quietly. "Do you? Because I'm tired of pretending this works. I'm tired of your sarcastic comments and your superiority complex. I'm tired of you." She turned toward the stairs, then paused. "I'm going out. Don't wait up." The front door slammed behind her with enough force to rattle the smart home sensors. I stood alone in our kitchen, listening to the rain and the subtle hum of the house's automated systems. My phone buzzed. A text from my brother Eli. Quote 10. Anniversary. Right. 8 years of marriage, and she'd walked out to meet another man. I looked around our house. My house, technically, since the deed was in my name alone. Smart lighting, automated climate control, security cameras, voice-activated everything. I'd designed half the systems myself, integrated them with my proprietary AI software that 3 major tech companies were currently bidding on. Cambria thought I was just another tech nerd who got lucky. She had no idea what was coming. I walked to my home office and pulled up the house's central control system. With a few keystrokes, I began systematically locking down every account, every system, every piece of technology that made this place run. My phone rang. "Cambria. Orion, the garage won't open." "Huh, that's weird." "Don't play games with me. Open the garage." I hung up and blocked her number. Then I started packing. By morning, I was gone. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I left Cambria exactly what she'd asked for: complete freedom. Freedom from my sarcastic comments, my superiority complex, and most importantly, freedom from my financial support. The note I left on the kitchen counter was simple. Parenter, quote, 14. Eli's workshop sat in a grittier part of Seattle, surrounded by auto repair shops and dive bars. My brother had always been the blue-collar Vanton, working with his hands while I worked with code. His place was perfect for what I had planned. "She really said that?" Eli asked, handing me a cup of coffee that could strip paint. "About you being boring?" "Among other things." I settled into the folding chair he'd set up next to his workbench. Quote 18. Quote 19. Quote 20. Eli shook his head. Quote 21. I pulled out my laptop and showed him the bank statements I'd printed. Joint accounts drained legally as of this morning, credit cards canceled, house utilities transferred to my personal account, car insurance canceled on her vehicle. "Jesus, Orion, you work fast." "I'm just getting started." My phone buzzed with notifications. Cambria had discovered the financial situation. The texts were increasingly frantic, but since I'd blocked her, they were going to my email instead. Quote 25. Quote 20. Quote 27. I could, actually, and I had. Quote 28. I told Eli, pulling up another document. Quote 29. It was an email thread between Cambria and Victor, dated 3 weeks ago. Most of it was the usual flirtatious garbage, but one exchange caught my attention. Victor. Quote 30. Cambria. Quote 31. Victor. Bull. Quote 32. We will hunt. Quote 33. Eli muttered. Quote 34. Quote 35. I closed the laptop. Quote 36. Quote 37. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Quote 38. The first step was intelligence gathering. I needed to know their routines, their weaknesses, their pressure points. Fortunately, Cambria had always been active on social media, and Victor was the type of man who needed everyone to know how successful he was. His Instagram was a goldmine: expensive cars, luxury restaurants, business meetings at exclusive clubs. The man documented his entire life like he was running for office. Cambria's social media painted a different picture. She'd been posting cryptic messages about Shash on quote 39 and quote 40. Her friends Trina and Lexi were all over the comments, offering support and making vague references to her, one to quote 41, or in quote 42, Trina had written. Or quote 43, Lexi added. I screenshotted everything. My phone rang. Unknown number. Quote 44, okay, quote 45, Cambria. She'd borrowed someone's phone. The quote 46, or the quote the 47, or the cure quote the 48, a quote like 49, la quote 50, quote 51. She paused, and I could practically hear her recalculating. Quote 52, quote 53, silence. Quote 54, quote 50. The silence stretched longer this time. Quote 56, quote 57. I hung up and turned off the phone. Eli was grinning. Quote 58, quote 59. But this was just the beginning. Cambria and Victor had made one critical miscalculation. They'd underestimated the boring, predictable tech nerd. That was going to cost them everything. My friend Red had earned his nickname from his hair color, but he'd kept it because of his specialty, making people see red when they discovered what he could find out about them. Former cybersecurity consultant, current freelance investigator, and exactly the kind of person you wanted on your side when planning a campaign. Quote 60. Red said, reviewing the files I'd brought him, "Your wife's cheating with her boss. They tried to steal your intellectual property, and now you want to destroy them socially and financially without breaking any laws. That's the plan. I like it. It's elegant." He cracked his knuckles. "What do you need?" "Everything. Schedules, habits, weaknesses, dirty laundry. I want to know what they eat for breakfast and where they buy their coffee." Red's investigation took 3 days and produced a goldmine of information. Victor Ralston was a creature of habit. Same coffee shop every morning at 7:30, same gym every Tuesday and Thursday, same expensive restaurant every Friday night. He drove a custom Porsche that he'd posted about extensively online, calling it his baby and his pride and joy. More importantly, he was married to Kellen Ralston, a pediatric nurse who worked at Seattle Children's Hospital. They had one teenage son, Tyler, who played varsity soccer. From all appearances, Kellen had no idea about her husband's extracurricular activities. Cambria had moved back in with her friend Trina temporarily, sleeping on a couch that probably cost less than the shoes she was wearing. Her credit cards were maxed out, her bank account was empty, and she'd been calling in sick to work more often than she'd been showing up. "She's desperate," Red reported. "Trina's getting tired of playing host, and Victor's been dodging her calls." "What about the neighborhood?" "Oh, that's the best part," Red said with a grin. "Marla Goss, your HOA president, has been asking everyone if they know where you disappeared to. She spotted you loading boxes into Eli's truck at midnight, and she's been eager to find out what's going on." Marla Goss was the neighborhood's unofficial information hub. If you wanted news to spread through our community, you told Marla. If you wanted to control the narrative, you made sure Marla heard your version first. Quote 71, quote 72, quote 73. The Lake Point Community Center hosted a monthly coffee social, and this month's gathering was scheduled for Saturday morning. I made sure to arrive early, bringing fresh pastries from the expensive bakery Cambria used to frequent. "Orion!" Marla practically pounced on me as I walked in. "We've all been so worried. Where have you been?" "Taking some time to think," I said, setting down the pastry boxes. "It's been a difficult few weeks." Within minutes, I was surrounded by neighbors, all expressing concern and asking carefully worded questions about Cambria's absence. I played it perfectly, the hurt husband who was trying to be dignified about a painful situation. Quote 78. I said when pressed for details. Quote 79. Quote 80, said Janet from 2 houses down. Quote 81. I shrugged sadly. Quote 82. The collective intake of breath was audible. Quote 83. Marla's eyes were wide, among other things. Then she walked out on our anniversary to meet him. I didn't have to embellish. The truth was damaging enough, and I delivered it with just the right mix of hurt and dignity. By the time I left, I knew the story would be all over the neighborhood by evening. My phone buzzed as I drove away. Text from an unknown number. Quote 85. I responded. Quote 86. She didn't text back. Phase 2 began that afternoon. I drove to Victor's neighborhood, an upscale area where the houses were bigger and the pretensions were thicker. His Porsche was parked in the driveway, gleaming despite the Seattle drizzle. I parked across the street and waited. At 4:30, a woman emerged from the house. Kellen Ralston, according to Red's research. She looked tired, probably coming off a hospital shift. She got into a sensible Honda and drove away. At 5:15, Victor appeared. He spent 10 minutes lovingly wiping down his car before getting in and driving toward downtown. I followed at a distance. He met Cambria at an upscale wine bar called Eleve. Through the window, I watched them sit close together, her hand on his arm, his fingers tracing patterns on her wrist. They looked like any other couple having an intimate evening out, except he was married and she was supposed to be my wife. I took photos, then I went inside. Orion? Cambria's voice cracked like a whip across the intimate atmosphere. Quote 88. Quote 89. I walked to the bar, ignoring their table. Quote 90. Victor stood up, his face flushed. Quote 91. Quote 92. I ordered a whiskey, neat. Quote 93. The color drained from his face. Quote 94. Quote 95. Victor hissed. Quote 96. I raised my glass in a mock toast. Quote 97. I left them sitting there, Cambria's face white with rage, Victor looking like he'd swallowed glass. The real fun was just beginning. The Lake Point Annual Charity Gala was the social event of the year, where the neighborhood's elite gathered to see and be seen while writing tax-deductible checks. I'd skipped it the last 2 years, but this year I wouldn't miss it for the world. Marla had personally called to invite me, expressing concern about my well-being and insisting that I shouldn't isolate myself. She had no idea she was helping me set up the perfect stage. I arrived fashionably late, wearing my best suit and carrying a bottle of wine that cost more than most people's car payments. The community center had been transformed into an elegant ballroom, complete with string quartet and ice sculptures. Orion! Marla rushed over, resplendent in a gown that probably violated several HOA guidelines about appropriate colors. I'm so glad you came. How are you holding up? Better every day, I said, scanning the room. Is Cambria here? She arrived about an hour ago, with that man from her work. Marla's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Quote 113. I spotted them across the room. Cambria wore a red dress that hugged every curve, her hair swept up to show off diamond earrings I'd bought her for our 5th anniversary. Victor stood beside her in an expensive tuxedo, his hand possessively on her lower back. They were holding court with a small group of neighbors, Cambria animated and laughing, Victor nodding along with the practiced charm of a man used to working a room. Excuse me, I told Marla. I should say hello. I approached their group slowly, timing my arrival perfectly. So grateful for all your support during this difficult transition, Cambria was saying. It's wonderful to have friends who understand that sometimes people just grow apart. Cambria. I stepped into the circle, my voice warm and friendly. You look beautiful. Victor. The conversation stopped like someone had hit a pause button. Orion. Cambria recovered first, her smile bright and fake. How nice to see you. I wanted to thank you both, actually. Victor's eyebrows rose. Quote 113. Quote 114. The neighbors shifted uncomfortably. Janet from down the street cleared her throat. Quote 115. Cambria said carefully. Quote 116. I kept my voice conversational, like we were discussing the weather. Quote 117. Quote teen. Victor stepped forward, his face darkening. Quote 119. Quote 120. Or quote 121. I interrupted. Or in quote 122. The circle of neighbors had grown larger, drawn by the obvious tension. I could see phones appearing, people pretending to check messages while actually recording. Quote 123. Cambria's voice was strained. This isn't the place. You're right. The place for this conversation was our house, on our anniversary, when you walked out to meet him. I turned to address the growing crowd. But since we're all here, maybe you could explain to everyone how long you've been planning to steal my AI software. I never. Really? Because I have the emails. I pulled out my phone. Should I read them aloud? Victor grabbed my wrist. Give me that. Get your hands off me. Stop making a scene, he hissed. I'm not the one making a scene. You're the one who's been screwing another man's wife and planning corporate espionage." The crowd murmured. Someone gasped. I saw Marla's eyes light up with the kind of joy that only comes from witnessing truly spectacular gossip. Quote 134. Cambria said, but her voice was shaking. Quote 135. Quote 136. Victor's grip on my wrist tightened. "Shut up. The truth hurts, doesn't it? Tell me, Cambria, did you really think a married man was going to leave his family for you, or were you just hoping to cash in on my software before he threw you away?" "That's not—" Cambria started, then stopped. The doubt in her voice was audible. She looked at Victor, searching his face for reassurance. That didn't come. Quote 140. I said to Victor. Quote 141, quote 142. Victor released my wrist and started to turn away. Quote 143. He spun back around, his face twisted with rage. Quote 144, quote 145. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. I could see people typing frantically on their phones, sharing the drama in real time. Quote 146. Victor snarled. Quote 147. Quote 148. I laughed, and the sound carried across the room. Quote 149. Cambria was crying now, her perfect makeup running down her cheeks. Quote 150. Quote 151, I said. Quote 152. I turned to leave, then paused. Quote 153. His face went white. Quote 154. Quote 155. I walked away, leaving them standing in the wreckage of their public humiliation. Behind me, I could hear the excited chatter of a neighborhood that would be talking about this night for years. Outside, Victor's precious Porsche sat in the parking lot, covered in washable paint that spelled out cheater across the windshield and liar down both sides. It wasn't permanent damage, but it was visible, humiliating, and completely legal. I drove home to Eli's workshop, where my brother was waiting with a beer and a grin. How'd it go? Better than expected. Checked the neighborhood social media in about an hour. And then? Then we moved to phase 3. The beauty of modern life is how interconnected everything is. Pull one thread, and the whole fabric starts to unravel. Victor and Cambria were about to learn that lesson the hard way. Red had done his homework. Victor's company, Ralston Marketing Solutions, was privately held but heavily leveraged. They'd taken out significant loans to expand, betting on landing several major contracts that were currently in negotiation. More importantly, Victor's personal finances were a house of cards. The expensive car, the luxury house, the designer clothes, all financed through credit and loans maintained by his executive salary and stock options. Quote 162. Red reported. Quote 163. Quote 164. Quote 165. Quote 166. My first call was to Kellen Ralston. Quote 167. The meeting took place at a coffee shop near the hospital where she worked. Kellen was younger than I'd expected, with tired eyes and the efficient manner of someone used to dealing with crises. "I'm sorry about your marriage," she said after I'd explained the situation. Quote 169. She stirred her coffee slowly. Quote 170. Quote 171. Her head snapped up. Quote 172. I slid a folder across the table. Red's investigation had uncovered a pattern. 3 other female employees over the past 5 years, all of whom had left the company suddenly after brief affairs with Victor. "He's a predator," I said simply. "Cambria's just the latest victim?" Kellen read through the documents, her face growing paler with each page. "These women, he destroyed their careers. And now he's trying to destroy mine. The difference is, I'm fighting back. What do you want from me?" "Nothing. I just thought you deserved to know the truth." She closed the folder and looked at me with something that might have been respect. "What are you going to do?" "Whatever it takes to protect myself and my work." "Legally?" "Of course." She nodded slowly. "Then you have my support." That evening, Kellen confronted Victor at home. I know because she called me afterward. "He tried to deny everything at first," she said. "Then he blamed the women for seducing him. Finally, he accused me of not being supportive enough of his career." Classic deflection. "I've filed for separation. My lawyer says I have grounds for a significant settlement, especially with the evidence of his pattern of behavior. I'm sorry it came to this. I'm not. I should have left years ago." The next phase required more finesse. I couldn't directly sabotage Victor's business, but I could make sure his potential clients knew exactly who they were dealing with. The 3 major contracts Victor was pursuing all involved companies with strong policies against workplace harassment and discrimination. I made sure their HR departments received anonymous packages containing documentation of Victor's pattern of behavior, along with copies of the emails between him and Cambria discussing the theft of my intellectual property. I also reached out to the 3 former employees who had been victimized by Victor. 2 of them agreed to speak with reporters about their experiences. The story broke on a Thursday morning. Quote 190. By noon, all 3 potential contracts had been canceled. By evening, Victor's company's board of directors had called an emergency meeting. Cambria, meanwhile, was discovering that her association with Victor had made her toxic by proxy. Her own company, concerned about liability and reputation damage, placed her on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. She tried calling me from yet another borrowed phone. Quote 191. She said, without preamble. Quote 192. Quote 193. Quote 194. Quote 195. Quote 196. I laughed. Quote 197. Quote 198. Quote 199. Quote 200. Quote 201. Quote 202. For a moment, I almost believed her. Then I remembered the emails, the midnight texts, the way she'd looked at me with contempt in our kitchen. Sorry doesn't give me back 8 years of marriage. Sorry doesn't undo the betrayal. Sorry doesn't make up for the fact that you were willing to destroy my career for money. What do you want? What will it take to end this? I want you to disappear from my life completely. I want you to stop using my name, stop contacting me, and stop pretending you're the victim in this situation. And if I do that, then maybe the media attention will die down. Maybe you can rebuild your life somewhere else, with someone who doesn't know what you're capable of. You're not giving me much choice. You didn't give me much choice either. She hung up without saying goodbye, but I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. 3 weeks after the charity gala, Victor's world had completely collapsed. His company had fired him, his wife had moved out, and his house was in foreclosure. The Porsche had been repossessed, and he was living in a studio apartment across town. Cambria wasn't doing much better. Her job was gone, her friends had distanced themselves, and she was couch surfing between acquaintances who were growing tired of her drama. They were desperate, which made them dangerous. Red surveillance had picked up several meetings between them, usually at cheap diners or parking lots. They were planning something, but he couldn't get close enough to hear details. Quote 210. He warned me. Quote 211. Quote 2 coup. The trap I'd been preparing for weeks was finally ready to spring. It started with a single phone call to Victor's new number. Quote 213, I said when he answered. Quote 214, quote 215, silence. Quote 216, quote 217, with quote 218, something quote 219, quote 20, quote 21. Another long pause. Quote 22, quote 23, quote 24, quote 225. I hung up before he could ask more questions. The house looked exactly the same from the outside, but I'd spent the past 3 weeks preparing for this moment. Every smart home system had been upgraded, every security camera repositioned, every automated feature reprogrammed. Eli and Red were positioned in the workshop across the street, monitoring everything through the security feeds. The neighborhood watch group had been quietly alerted that there might be some disturbance at my house, and several neighbors were conveniently positioned to witness whatever happened. At exactly 8 o'clock, a beat-up sedan pulled into my driveway. Victor and Cambria got out, both looking like they'd aged years in the past month. I opened the door before they could knock. Right on time. Come in. They entered cautiously, looking around like they expected an ambush. In a way, they were right. Nice to see you've kept the place up, Cambria said, trying for casual conversation. It's easier when I don't have to clean up after anyone else. Victor cut straight to the point. What's this deal you mentioned? Let's sit down first. Can I get you anything to drink? Just talk, Victor said. We sat in the living room, them on the couch, me in my chair. The positioning was deliberate. They were directly in view of 3 different cameras. Here's what I'm prepared to offer, I began. $50,000 each in exchange for signed agreements that you'll both relocate at least 500 miles away and never contact me again. Their eyes lit up. $50,000 wasn't life-changing money, but for 2 people with nothing, it was salvation. Quote 234, Cambria asked. Quote 235. Quote 236. Victor was suspicious. Quote 237. Quote 2 through 8. They exchanged glances. I could see them having an entire conversation without words. Quote 239. Victor said finally. Quote 240. I pulled out 2 thick documents. Quote 241. While they read, I excused myself to get drinks. In the kitchen, I activated the next phase of my plan. The smart home system began recording everything, not just video and audio, but also data from the hidden sensors I'd installed. Stress monitors, voice analysis software, even micro-expression recognition. I wanted a complete record of what was about to happen. When I returned with water glasses, they were whispering urgently. Everything look acceptable? I asked. It seems straightforward, Cambria said, but 50,000 isn't really enough to relocate and start over. It's what I'm offering. What about 100,000 each? Victor suggested. That would make the relocation more realistic. I pretended to consider it. I suppose I could go to 75,000 each. 100, Victor insisted, and we'll need it in cash. Cash? I raised an eyebrow. That's a lot of cash to have on hand. We can't risk having our accounts frozen or garnished, Cambria explained. Too many creditors looking for us. I see. Well, I suppose I could arrange it, but it would take a few days to get that much cash together. How long? Victor asked. A week, maybe 2. They exchanged another look. That's too long, Cambria said. We need to move faster than that. Why the rush? Victor's jaw tightened. Quote 2661. Quote 262. Quote 2633. But it was my concern because I was recording everything. Whatever they were running from, whatever they'd done, it was all being documented. All right, I said. I can have the cash by Friday, but I'll need some assurance that you'll hold up your end of the bargain. What kind of assurance? I smiled. The kind that ensures you never bother me again. That's when things got interesting. Victor stood up abruptly. Quote 2628, quote 269, I'll quote 270. His voice was hard. Quote 271, the quote 272, Cambria stood up too. On quote 270, quote 274, quote 275, I almost laughed. Quote 276. Quote 279, Victor said. Quote 278. Quote 229. Victor pulled out his phone and showed me a series of documents. They were impressive forgeries, almost professional quality. Someone had put a lot of work into creating fake evidence of wrongdoing on my part. Quote 208, I said. Quote 281. Quote 282, Cambria said. Quote 283. Quote 284. Quote 285. I stood up slowly. Quote 286. Quote 287, Victor asked. Quote 288. Quote 289. I agreed. Quote 290. They smiled, thinking they'd won. Fortunately, I continued, they're never going to become public. Why not? Because you're both about to be arrested. The confusion on their faces was priceless. Arrested for what? Cambria asked. Extortion, blackmail, conspiracy. Take your pick. You can't prove anything, Victor said, but his voice was shaking. Can't I? I gestured around the room. This entire conversation has been recorded. You just threatened to release false documents unless I paid you money. That's textbook extortion. You invited us here, Cambria protested. You offered us money. I offered you money to relocate. You demanded more money and threatened me when I couldn't provide it immediately. Then you attempted to blackmail me with fabricated evidence. No one will believe that. They'll believe the recordings. They'll believe the documentation. They'll believe the pattern of behavior you've both established over the past month. Victor lunged toward me, but I was ready. I stepped aside and he crashed into the coffee table, sending the fake documents flying. That's assault, I said calmly. Also being recorded. Cambria was crying again. This isn't what we wanted. We just needed money to get away. Away from what? From the mess we made, from the people we owe, from the consequences of our choices. What people do you owe? Victor was getting up from the floor, his face twisted with rage. Shut up, Cambria. What people? I repeated. We borrowed money, she said through her tears. When we lost our jobs, when the bills kept coming, we borrowed money from people who don't accept late payments. Loan sharks. We were desperate. So you decided to extort me instead of facing the consequences of your actions. We didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. You chose to have an affair. You chose to steal my work. You chose to borrow money from criminals. You chose to try to blackmail me. Every step of the way, you made choices. What happens now? Victor asked. I pulled out my phone and showed them the screen. It displayed a video feed of police cars pulling into my driveway. Now you face the consequences. The front door opened and Detective Sarah Martinez entered, followed by 2 uniformed officers. Mr. Vanton, we got your call. Detective Martinez, thank you for coming so quickly. I believe you'll find everything you need on the recordings. As the police handcuffed Victor and Cambria, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Quote 324, Cambria said as they led her toward the door. Quote 325. I replied, Bui Tobra, quote 326, quote 327. Victor snarled, quote 328. And it was. The recordings were clear, the evidence was overwhelming, and the charges were serious. Victor and Cambria both pled guilty to attempted extortion and received sentences that included prison time and restitution. More importantly, they were finally out of my life forever. I stood in my house, my home, and listened to the silence. No more drama, no more betrayal, no more games. Just peace. Cambria had been right about one thing. I was predictable, predictably thorough, predictably methodical, and predictably unwilling to let anyone destroy what I'd built. She'd wanted excitement and adventure. She'd gotten exactly what she asked for. And so had I.